And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Roll call.
That's right. Good morning, 8:05 live Eastern Time, and of course 5:05 Pacific Coast. It's dark, bright, and early. Good morning, everybody. If you were here Monday, I appreciate it. I had a rough time. I definitely had food poisoning. It was a horrible day. I don't know if anybody's ever had food poisoning, man. It knocked me out the entire day. I tried to get up. I just couldn't. I was in agony. Everything was hurting. I was in pain. I tried to make it through the podcast. It was tough, but thank you, everybody. Anyone who wish me to get better, I appreciate it. But definitely have some residual effects. It was rough. If anybody's ever had food poisoning, oh my God, it's terrible. Anyway, got a good one coming for you. New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. He's coming on today. He should be on about 8:30. So got a good interview for you. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've been getting a lot of hate after we promoted this video. I think we talked about it. A lot of people aren't happy the fact that we're having a Democratic Socialist candidate on. But I think, like we always say, it's very important to hear all sides and all issues and give people a chance to express their opinions, and we get to know so we could see what the media is reporting. I mean, if you look at the right media and then you look at the left media, you have absolutely no idea what's going on, because there's something happening in the middle that you're not getting in that sphere, where you will get in a conversation like this. I think last night, everyone and their mother, including people who I don't traditionally talk to, were texting me questions, their take on it. Hey, listen, we've been interviewing people for a while now. We've been interviewing political candidates for a while now. We don't do it in the adversarial mode. We do it we ask fair questions. We ask hard questions, but we do it in a conversational mode and a conversational tone. And that's how it's always going to be. If you think that the podcast should go into a different direction, I advise everybody, contact us. We'll help you start your own. And you could go and do whatever type of interview you think that you need to see. So we're excited to have Zohran Mamdani on here. I'm excited to hear about his Department of Community Safety plan. There are things I have questions. I can't say that I agree or I don't agree without hearing somebody out. And that's what it is. When I look at New York City right now, I see New York City's being ran by a criminal enterprise, and everyone's saying this kid can't win. And I'm sitting there and going, oh, but we should be hanging on to Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, who have proven themselves to not only be corrupt, but highly, highly incompetent. And you're going to tell me anybody but this kid? I don't know. I'm not buying that. I'm just not. I refuse to. Like, what do you think about that, Eric? Like, everyone's like consistently wants to dictate these interviews. Consistently.
It's funny you say that, right? So we're bringing on Zohran Mamdani. Obviously, most of our friends and listeners have Republican views, many independent, many conservative views that are in favor of this podcast. But with that being said, I always say opposition meets opportunity. Communication breaks barriers. We should speak to all walks of life and find out where the root cause is. If Zohran Mamdani ends up winning and he becomes New York City mayor, wouldn't you like to know what his root cause is for his policies? Where did he grow up? Why does he think a particular way? These are things that you would want to know. And what's interesting about what you said, John, so last week we had Tremel Thompson from the MTA, right? The union president for Transit Workers Union, Local 100. And I received a lot of feedback when it comes to that conversation we had. A lot of feedback, personal texts. A lot of people called me and said, wow, you guys are really soft on him. You went easy on him. I said, what do you want us to do? You want us to yell at him? You want us to beat him up? How does that break any barriers? How do we find out what's actually going on with what's in his head and why he actually put this on social media? And what do we find out from those conversations? Because we give people the floor and let them speak. What we found out is he tried other measures. He tried to have conversations. It didn't go anywhere. He didn't have any conversations with the union. The leadership never reached out to him with the NYPD. And with that, he decided to put it on social media, right? And that's why I always say the three T's of communication, right? First, you talk to someone, then you tell the proper authorities, and you have to take action. And that's what he did. Now, do I necessarily agree with it? No. But really where you have to put the onus on is the NYPD leadership. The fact that they had a knee-jerk reaction. He did what he had to do on his behalf, whether we agree with it or not. But the bottom line, he's not a cop, and it's not his job to advocate for the cops. He doesn't understand how the police department works. And sure enough, we've seen how adversarial it could be. And the outcome and the byproduct is the NYPD leadership, instead of trying to figure out what the problem is and have a conversation with Tramell Thompson, just as we did on this platform, instead they just take a knee-jerk reaction, put a Band-Aid on it. This will go away after some time, and then the cops will go back into the MTA break room with no conversation. It will surely happen, and then we may be back to where we were at before. There should be a conversation. Hey, we need a place for our cops to have breaks. Is this your break room? And figure out, what times are the MTA guys going there? Our guys need a break also. Or maybe the NYPD could facilitate and find some way to get the cops a break through other means. But that's not what we see here. That's why it's important we have these conversations with friends, foes. That's the reality. That's why I would say, read the book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Know your enemies, know your friends, know your enemies even better than you know your friends.
Yeah, so Zohran Mamdani, I think he's a formidable candidate in the New York City mayoral race. He's obviously proven himself to be a formidable candidate. It definitely in polling. He's polling 2 behind Andrew Cuomo. He's the reason that Eric Adams has jumped out of the Democratic race to run as an independent. But when it comes to Zohran Mamdani's fundraising ability, I mean, he has by far blew out every single candidate in this race. I mean, he has fundraised. I mean, there it is right there. This is coming right from the Board of Elections. If you could see it right there, you see how funds received. And I want you to take particular note to the blue next to Zohran Mamdani, right? And why that's important is because those are donations from $1 to $175. Those are smaller donations. So this is coming from the people on the ground. When you look at other charts, when you look at his outside funding, his money that's coming from outside of New York City, he doesn't have as much as the rest of the candidates out in the field. I mean, look at the blue compared to everyone else. He has won over the people. So that's the thing that no one's realizing what Zohran Mamdani has done is he has actually outdone the Republican and Democratic Party. He's shown them exactly how to win a race, how a race in 2025 should be done. Now, you want to talk about private money. Candidates' campaign average contributions through private funds. Look, Eric Adams all the way at the top, right? Look at Zohran Mamdani. He is in second. He's the furthest at all of the major candidates. He basically has no private money coming in. So that's the thing. He is campaigning like we've never seen before. I think he's running, honestly, with the exception of him eating on the train, I believe he's running a perfect campaign, both on social media. And then when you look at how much money he's raised, it's indisputable at this point. He's not only a formidable figure, his campaign team is honestly one that should be replicated, that the Republicans and the Democrats should be looking at and saying, wow, what are we doing wrong?
Well, to me, that chart paints, that chart paints a picture that, on this platform, friends, listeners, or anybody that's in New York City right now should pay attention. Just to the ability for him to raise this money shows where the mindset is people in New York City at this point. What are they thinking? Who are they supporting? Right? Because he's running a hell of a campaign. For him to actually get so much funding, he has to have people behind him, and people are behind him, right? Eric Adams is leading when it comes to private contracts. We know why he leads when it comes to private contracts, right? There's a lot of people that make money because Eric Adams is in place. But for Zohran Mamdani, for him to get this campaign and the funding that he's getting, it shows you where the mindset is. And his policies are being backed by people in New York City. And he could potentially be the mayor. And if he's not, and if he doesn't win, his ability to have such a running campaign really throws a monkey wrench in. It changes the course for Cuomo, it changes the course for Adams, and it changes the course for Republicans also, because a lot of votes are going to Zohran Mamdani. I think he's run a hell of a campaign. It's probably one of the most impressive we've ever seen. So whether you agree with it or not, you have to say to yourself, okay, this city is encompassed by mostly Democrats at this point. He's part of the DSA, Democratic Socialist Party. And look how many people are behind him. That's the state of New York City. So this should be a great indicator of where we're at right now. And what does that say for the police department? What does that say for New York City agencies? It tells you where we're at right now by who's the front runners in New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and when you look at his social media advocacy, I mean, this is a modern campaign. This is a campaign that should be ran in modern times. And the thing that I could tell about his campaign, as opposed to an Andrew Cuomo or an Eric Adams, unlike those two, he's out on New York City streets every day. He rides the trains every day. He rides the buses every day. He's interacting with people on the street every day. And that's why he's getting such little donations. I'm going to jump off for 1 second. If you could just hold that down for a minute.
Absolutely. I hope John's not throwing up like I had on Monday. Anyway, yeah, absolutely. I think that Zohran Mamdani has run a hell of a campaign. Does that mean we agree with his policies? No, but it sure tells you what people are thinking in New York City at this point. The amount of donations that he's getting is just insane. And what John also showed with that chart, we're seeing the majority of these campaigns funding, the donations are $1 to $175. So these aren't coming from big wigs. These are coming from real people in New York City. That's something that we have to look at. And this chart right here, again, we have to look at as further indication of what's going on in New York City. It tells you a big tale. It tells you about who's in place here. That is so big, and that's really important to highlight, is that a majority of these donors are giving $1 to $175. These are not big wigs. This is not Jessica Tisch money. These are just actual New York City people that want to donate, and they see him as a viable candidate. Whether you agree with Zohran Mamdani or not, that's why it's important to really understand the state of affairs that we're at. I mean, even look at Eric Adams, I think is really a great dichotomy between him and Zohran Mamdani, because Eric Adams gets his money from big private industry and corporations and big private contracts, in comparison to Zohran Mamdani, where he's getting his money from the actual people. And look at the blue for Eric Adams. There's barely any blue. His donors, his is majority green. And that's anyone that's given $1,000 or more. And Zohran Mamdani is getting more in campaign funds, but yet they're coming from the actual grassroots. Rob Lukash says it. Grassroots politics can shape an election. Absolutely. That's exactly what's going on here. And as I said before, John, I'm sure you can agree. Even Juju said it earlier. There's a difference between campaigning. There's a difference between campaigning and actually governing. Yes. But to have the ability to campaign and get so much funding from the actual people says people are behind him. They see him as the man for New York City.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's a video of Zohran Mamdani.
Every New Yorker deserves to be safe. And today I'm announcing a plan to deliver exactly that. Public safety is created by stable homes, good-paying work, and well-resourced neighborhoods. Addressing these issues are at the core of our campaign. But we must also aggressively pursue evidence-based strategies that prevent violence and crime before they occur. I will create a Department of Community Safety, the DCS. This new agency will coordinate a whole-of-government approach to protect New Yorkers like never before. We will invest in citywide mental health outreach and crisis response, expand gun violence prevention programs, address hate, and tackle homelessness. The DCS will make public transit safer, placing dedicated outreach workers in our subway stations, transforming vacant commercial units to provide medical services and connections to long-term care, and investing in transit ambassadors to assist New Yorkers on their journeys. There will be visible, trained teams in our subways. Their presence and their work will make all of us safer. Police have a critical role to play, but right now we're relying on them to deal with the failures of our social safety net, which is preventing them from doing their actual jobs. It's one of the reasons so many crimes are left unresolved. New Yorkers deserve a leader that treats public safety with the seriousness it deserves. I invite you to learn more about the Department of Community Safety at zohranfornyc.com.
So that's his community safety plan. He wants to have transit ambassadors. I hear him say the NYPD is going to play a vital role, a critical role was the terminology he used. But that's why he's here today, to tell us what that critical role is, to break down what these transit ambassadors are doing. There's many facets. It's a 17-page document. His links to his campaign, to the community safety plan. It's all in the links below wherever you're listening or watching it. And I think it's important. I think it's important to go through all of it so we understand it before people write it off as a crazy idea. Before people say, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's not how we do things." I could tell you right now, the way that I see that the Eric Adams and public safety are happening in New York City, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not the way to do things. So if you're happy with that, then all right, then we present no new ideas. There's nothing else to bring there. I mean, on the face of this video alone, without him explaining it, what do you think about the Department of Community Safety?
Just on the face of it, right? The first thing that you think is, oh, here's another defund the police mayor, or defund the police candidate, which very well may be. And that's why it's great that we have these conversations to find out where his head is. How does he want to utilize the NYPD? Does he want the NYPD to be the focal point of community safety throughout New York City? Does he want the NYPD to be the focal point for public safety? Is the NYPD going to have the same much leverage? Is he looking to take resources from the NYPD to build this Department of Community Safety? Those are the questions that I have. What is his take on the NYPD coordinate with this Department of Community Safety? Is the Department of Community Safety going to be the higher tier when it comes to public safety? These are questions that we have to ask. Just on its face, listen, it sounds great to have trans ambassadors, basically what is liaisons. Questions, are they going to be liaisons with the police department? Is this going to be some social restorative justice program? So these are questions that we have to have. I mean, just on the face, for someone that's a layman's person when it comes to public safety, it sounds great. Hey, he wants to make it safer. He's not telling you that I'm pro-criminal activity. I want to make it safer. So it sounds great. The question is, how is he going to coordinate the NYPD along with this Department of Community Safety? And what we see from a lot of candidates, right? We even had Prince here, Paperboy Prince last week. And we hear other candidates really moving away from the NYPD as the focal point of public safety, and the NYPD just being a facet and attributing factor to public safety. Like Baldwin says right here, sounds like a civilian police department to me. And that's what we see ultimately. It sounds to me like moving away from the men with the guns and going towards this social work type stuff. And it's great. It sounds great. But the reality is we need men with guns. We need men with guns that are trained on policing. And there has to be the NYPD or whatever law enforcement agency, whatever we want to call it. If someone wants to call it something else, has to be the hierarchy of public safety, and they can funnel in these other programs. But to have a civilian-based type community safety team and remove the NYPD would be a major problem.
Yeah, and I think the thing that, in my opinion, and I'm curious what Zohran's opinion is of it, is my opinion. I believe that New Yorkers' public safety is the number one issues that New York City residents are facing, and commuters and workers and businesses. And I think that what takes the top of that cake is homelessness and mental illness on New York City streets. And I think the de Blasio administration and the Adams administration in particular have failed miserably at railing this in. I mean, they have weaponized arresting homeless and mentally ill people and not even helping them, not giving any help. I saw a press conference yesterday with Eric Adams, and he was Off Topics Tuesday. He brought up like his new outreach program, which is basically like a revamp of the homeless outreach program, but it's much smaller. They don't have any of the services. They don't have any of the coordination with the other units that was there. So it's really not the homeless outreach of the past. And for anyone that's familiar with homeless outreach in the past in the NYPD, that was not an NYPD led tactic or public safety plan. That was led by social workers and other advocacy groups. And what the NYPD did was stay in the background. So I'm curious what this department's about. How large will it be? We saw the money said it's at about $1 billion, right? 600 million from defunding programs, about 400 million from new funds. That's what's stated in the document. And people are like, oh, that's crazy. That money's crazy. Really? Eric Adams spent over $7 billion, and we have no idea where the money went. You're telling me you can't go through some of his programs and find $600 million? I know that I can in only a few hours. I know that I could look through his program in only a few hours and come up with that money easily, because the amount of money that's being spent by this administration, and to be fair, the previous administrations, when we look at the Thrive organization. So I'm willing to hear anybody out, because obviously doing what we've been doing does not work, and it's not working. And that's why Eric Adams is really, he's not really a major candidate in the elections. The reporters yesterday were asking him, why doesn't he step down? Like, why is he taking votes away from Andrew Cuomo? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm the mayor. What are you talking about? I'm the mayor. He's taking votes away from me. And so, it's that like, honestly, he's turning out. He said that his administration was going to be like David Dinkins, and it's turning out that way. He's going to be a one-term mayor.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting we talk about that, right? Most mayors in New York City have served 8 years, and Eric Adams could potentially just be a one-term mayor. At the same token, we still have to keep our eye on it. He could be a two-term mayor. And with that being said, sometimes you have to say to yourself, you know what? When it comes to Democratic Socialist or people that are anti-police and want to create some type of community safety team, as Simply E says, this is the UK model. Have cops patrol without guns, and when things go crazy, call the units with the guns. A lot of these candidates are moving to this idea, which is similar to that model. And then you have to say to yourself, can we really blame them? Honestly, because do I agree with it? Absolutely not. But can we blame them at the same token? If they had this ideology and now they see, well, we have a corrupt upper echelon, the NYPD. We have a complete criminal enterprise. We have a former chief Badry that's running an operation where we're stealing $300,000 to $400,000 for various lieutenants in the police department that are not even at work. And then you get someone like Zohran Mamdani. You can say to yourself, well, why would we need this type of organization that is taking all this money from the taxpayer when we could utilize this money for something else, when they don't really understand how important and how vital a law enforcement agency is when it's run properly. So the point is, what I'm saying, John, is the failures of the leadership of the NYPD has given more ammunition for candidates like Zohran Mamdani to say, hey, here's why we have to move from the police department and go towards a more civilianized community safety team. It's these contributing factors that just make it more difficult for the NYPD to be assailed, to say, hey, this is why you need the NYPD.
I mean, and here's the other thing, like people in New York City are they're so off base that they allow Eric Adams to make statements that he shouldn't, because I don't believe that this is a new and we'll get Zohran's opinion on that. I don't believe that this is a new thing. I heard Eric Adams campaign on this. I heard Eric Adams go on Hot 97, and we played that for you here. He went on Hot 97 on Ebro's show in the morning, and he said he wants to he didn't say defund. He said he wants to take away $600 to $1 billion from the NYPD. He wants to decrease the NYPD's headcount, and he wants to pass all of their duties off to civilians. And nobody batted an eye, and most of you guys voted for him, and the unions were like, yeah, he's going to be good for us. I'm like, and so at the same time, everyone's beating up Zohran. Oh, he's anti-police. He hates the police. This is the same plan that Eric Adams presented on Hot 97. This is the same thing that Eric Adams done. He didn't keep the money away because he's highly incompetent. He spent more money. He didn't get the $600 million or the $1 billion. He actually blew the budget out by more than that on the overtime budget, because, we had so many scandals, the on-duty booty, the cash for ass program, deputy commissioners now can earn overtime, all these new things that have never happened before in the NYPD. So highly incompetent, but he definitely, what he was successful at is he lowered the headcount significantly. So while John Schell's on the news telling you the headcount's about 33.5, everyone knows that's not true. Ask anybody. Go into a precinct. See how many calls they're running. Tell me that the headcount's at 33.5. Really? Because if they are, where are they? They must be hiding in some building somewhere called the One Police Plaza, because I don't see anybody there. And the other thing that Eric Adams didn't do is he never put together an effective response to mental illness and homelessness, which he said he was going to do. His only response now is to utilize broken windows against the homeless and the mentally ill, where they go out nightly, lock up numerous homeless people without warning, without offering services. They lock them up, and every case is declined prosecution, and the homeless mentally ill person is back out on the street in that day. So has not been able to effectively address any issues that New York City's facing.
Well, that's where I have to agree with some of these Democrats, these socialists, that there has to be another approach when it comes to homelessness. Homelessness has become a major issue to every candidate right now. Every candidate has in their platform how they're going to address the homeless. And the reason why is because the homelessness in New York City has been out of control, especially in the subways. It's such an important issue. It's one of the top issues for every candidate in New York City right now. So I have to agree, there has to be another approach. Normally we hear the terminology I would hear in the police department: we can't arrest ourselves out of this situation, right? Because that's the NYPD's approach, and that's the forte of the NYPD, and it should be that we make arrest to correct and rectify a situation. But when it comes to homelessness, that's something different. That's where I can see we do have some socialist plans, and we have social workers help homeless and actually get them off the street and get them situated just by arresting them. It's funny, we're arresting homeless people to get them off the street for a couple hours, and yet we have actual criminals in the street that we're not arresting. So that's where things get completely lopsided. It's a paradox. Why don't we actually take care of the situation? If a homeless person commits a crime, of course, but when it comes to these encampments that they have, these are minor violations. Why are we actually summoning and making an arrest? It doesn't actually correct the problem. It's just a Band-Aid. So I agree, there has to be other programs. No one should be homeless in New York City. No one should be out in the streets cold at night or sweating in the summer days. That's something that we should take care of. And there is no doubt. There's a correlation and there's a nexus between homelessness, substance abuse, and also mentally ill. So those three things, to me, come full circle: homelessness, mentally ill, and substance abuse. And we have to really correct those issues and hit those in different ways. Obviously, we're making arrest with the NYPD for drug dealers and people also buying these drugs. But we have to actually find the coordination to who's using substances and that are homeless and mentally ill. I would say the majority of people that are homeless fall into those categories.
No, I agree. I totally agree. And I think, when you look at New York City's budget, $1 billion a year goes to homelessness, and we failed. And you're like, where's the money going? The Thrive program that people consistently bring up, Eric Adams renamed it and gave it more money. What's happening? It's complete failure. And when you look at mental illness, it's the same thing. $1 billion a year goes out of New York City budget from taxpayers. And what's happening? Has any of this been successful? So to say that we can't do things, that we don't have money, I don't think I'll never buy into that. We can't do things. We don't have money to do it, when we have plenty of money that we're watching going down the toilet bowl every day and being completely misused. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome to the stage mayoral candidate, New York State Assembly member Zohran Mamdani. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Zohran, please tell me if I say it correctly. Zohran Mamdani.
Absolutely correct.
It's a pleasure to have you, member of the State Assembly. Thank you so much for coming on, taking time. I know you got a busy schedule. So let's just get right into it. If you could tell us where you grew up, how you grew up, and how you got into politics, and especially what put your eye on becoming New York City mayor.
Absolutely. So I was born in Kampala, Uganda, in East Africa. I came to New York City when I was 7 years old, grew up first in Morningside Heights, because my dad got a job at Columbia, so that's where we moved. And I went to middle school at Morningside Heights, went to high school at Bronx Science, went to college in Maine, came back to New York City, moved around a bunch, worked around. Yeah, that's me by Lincoln Center when I graduated from science. And then worked in Bay Ridge for a little bit, and then moved to Astoria and was a foreclosure prevention housing counselor in Queens. I worked out of Jackson Heights and Richmond Hill. I worked with low to moderate income homeowners on the brink of eviction. And then that was when I ran for state assembly in 2019. I won in 2020 in my third term now as a state assembly member. And today actually marks 6 months of running for mayor.
I just got to say, I love Astoria. I lived there for a while. What's your favorite place on 30th Avenue? It's a great place to eat over there.
There are some great places. I mean, you know, you're going to get me a little bit in trouble, but I'll tell you, there's one place that I used to go to all the time. It's not really like a restaurant, more fast casual, but Peter Pan is where I used to go.
Right. Yeah, I know it's fun.
A lot of my quick salads and lunches that I needed.
Good fun.
So,
Where did you go to Astoria?
I've been commentating and following your campaign for a while, and I gotta say, I think that you guys are absolutely crushing it. Could you tell us a little bit about your campaign? We just showed a graph a little bit before you got on here showing the smaller donations, how you're absolutely crushing these candidates in the smaller donation. You led the race in fundraising. You capped out in the general election already. That was weeks ago that happened. Nobody has caught up to you so far. Could you tell us why you believe your campaign's been so effective with average New Yorkers?
You know, I think it's part of what you were actually saying earlier, John. Just was when I was getting on, I was hearing you talk about the fact that we have enough money to do so much of what we're told is impossible in this city. And I think for too long, New Yorkers have been told that the life that they're living is the only life that they could have. And people are hungry for a different kind of politics. They're hungry for a politics that puts working people first. And too often it's difficult to understand what a campaign is about, what a politician is fighting for. We've been very clear for 6 months. This is a campaign about making the city more affordable. That has a relentless focus on an economic agenda. It's not apply for a program, we'll consider you, maybe you'll be granted permission, then you'll get a stipend. It is very clear and straightforward. We're freezing the rent for more than 2 million tenants. We're making buses fast and free. We're delivering universal childcare. We're making it so the people who actually make the city run can afford to keep calling the city their home. Because I know that there are too many New Yorkers who are now former New Yorkers. They actually live in Connecticut or Pennsylvania or New Jersey, and they commute into New York City because they just can't afford the cost of rent, the cost of childcare, the cost of groceries. So I think it comes back to that, where people are tired of being told to celebrate the crumbs that they can't even feed their family on. They want to be able to earn a living that they can keep calling the city their home.
It's funny that you mentioned crumbs, because we talk about writing a book about the crumbs from this administration. You must have heard that before.
Yes, where are my crumbs?
So, but you know, it's interesting, right? So we talk about New York City is one of the richest cities in the entire world, right? It has more money than 47 states in the entire country when it comes to the actual, just the state breakdown itself. So that's interesting. Is how do we allocate the funding and how do we use it? So you talk about universal childcare. We heard about baby baskets, things. How would we afford something like that? How would we afford universal childcare in New York City for the working person? How do we afford baby baskets? Like, where does that money come from in your campaign? How do we govern that? And actually, how do we maintain that? If you were to get reelected, how do we maintain that for an 8-year span?
So, you know, I think a lot of this, it comes from two places. The first is we have about $115 billion budget on an annual basis in New York City. We live in a state with about a $250 billion budget itself. And at the city level, there's a lot of that money that I don't believe is being used in the most productive way. You know, when over the many years, over many city and state administrations, there's been this pivot towards consulting, towards outsourcing, towards privatization in the name of saving money. But when you actually look under the hood, you'll find a lot of times it's costing the city and the state more money than it was even intended to save. I mean, look at the Second Avenue subway. The last big subway extension we've had, you know, maybe in decades, it cost more money for the MTA spending on consulting than they did on construction. I mean, that's ridiculous. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Andrew Cuomo hollowed out the MTA's internal capacity a few years prior so that they didn't have anyone who knew how to do any of these big things anymore. They had to go to McKinsey. They had to go to so many of these so-called specialists in understanding just the nuts and bolts of what it means to do mass transit. The other point is, Eric, to your question, you know, about just how much wealth we have in this city. You know, I believe we need to tax the wealthiest New Yorkers to fund the services that will transform every New Yorker's life. And I've been very clear. You know, we've talked about freezing the rent, you know, making buses fast and free, delivering universal childcare. together, this agenda, along with every other thing I've proposed over the last 6 months, would be paid for and more by our proposal of raising taxes on the 1% of New Yorkers. These are New Yorkers who make $1 million a year or more, by a flat increase of 2%. So really, it's a rounding error. We're talking about, a couple tens of thousands of dollars for people who are making $1 million plus every year, and then taxing the most profitable corporations at the rate that they pay in New Jersey. We're talking about 11.5%. And that is something together, those things create $9 billion. And then you get an additional $1 billion through procurement reform, through hiring the actual number of fiscal auditors we need to collect the business tax we have, and through actually collecting the fines and fees that New York City is owed, but is not interested in collecting at all, especially when it comes to large-scale landlords.
So since you brought up freezing the rent, I own a small multifamily home, 2-family home. I rent it. For me, I don't charge nearly what I could charge for the rent. I actually probably charge about 25% less at each.
Please let me know when it gets vacant.
So I charge much less than what I could get at the going rate, and I haven't raised the rent on my tenants in 2 years. I am planning on raising the rent because things are getting so much more expensive, and it's actually becoming like a futile enterprise for myself. So, how does your plan affect somebody like me? Are you saying I can never raise the rent? Because I'll literally at some point it'll be where I'm actually, I already am, but it'll get to the point where it'll be unaffordable for me to even own.
So I completely understand where you're coming from, because the clients that I worked with when I was a foreclosure prevention housing counselor, many of these clients were, union guys who owned a 2-family house, rented out one unit to pay for the mortgage of the entire home. And it was so critical for them to be able to make ends meet. But what I'm speaking about with freezing the rent is specifically about rent stabilized housing. So I'm assuming you're not a rent stabilized rent. So this is specific to that, which is about half of all tenants who live in a specific category of units. I think overall we're talking about close to 2.5 million. The reason that I'm saying this is because I can actually deliver on it. I can't freeze the rent for market rate units, because that is ultimately a decision that's much more in the relationship between the landlord and the tenant. There are guidelines as to what's justifiable, things of that nature. With rent stabilized housing, the city has this board called the Rent Guidelines Board. It has 9 members. The mayor appoints each member. And a lot of politicians like to pretend that there's no relationship between the board, the mayor, the rent. It's all one and the same. And that's why under different political administrations, you see different approaches. Eric Adams, he said, I am real estate. He's raised the rent every single year. De Blasio froze the rent 3 times. Bloomberg rose the rent higher than inflation. It changes kind of administration to administration. And ultimately, John, what's of interest to me is stability. How do we keep people in their homes? In the same way that you said you haven't raised the rent for so long, that's what we're talking about, is that we have rent-stabilized landlords have been found to have an increase of 12% in their revenue. Rent-stabilized tenants, meanwhile, still have a median household income of $60,000. And what really worries me is older tenants who are on fixed incomes. You or me, if the rent goes up 1-2%, we can absorb that. But if you're a 75-year-old woman who has a specific check that comes in from Social Security, where are you going to get that extra, no matter how big or small it is? And I've had people come into my office in Astoria, an 82-year-old woman who's on the brink of eviction because her rent check was now twice the cost of her Social Security check. And we got her HRA, we got her a one-shot deal, but that's not sustainable at a systemic level. So that's where this comes from. And then the last thing I'd just say is the city has a program where if you're a landlord and these statistics of this 12% increase is not an accurate reflection of your economic circumstances, you can apply for assistance. It just requires you to open up your books to show that they're not matching up, and the city can provide you with that.
That's why it's so important that we have these long form platforms. Just this podcast here gives an opportunity for really to dive in and explain what's behind the curtain. Because for the most part, when it comes to candidates, we get sound bites or maybe some small excerpts, and just at the surface, not really understanding inner linings. Because I agree, when it comes to elderly, especially, the lifespans are much longer now. The inflation, they just can't keep up with it. So I definitely understand that. But also what we see with New York City is the Great Escape. We talk about it all the time. Marlon says it here, Finance Unfiltered Family. other members of the audience commenting. Corporations are already leaving for South Florida, Texas, and Tennessee. If you tax them further, they will flee faster. And that's one of our concerns is how do you incentivize these big corporations to stay in New York City where they could just go right over the bridge to New Jersey or go down south and move their business, especially with virtual type employment, really changes the game. How do we incentivize them to stay with that tax burden now?
So it's a great question from Marlon. And I think what it comes to is this is the conversation that happens always when we talk about taxing corporations, asking them to pay their fair share. The beauty about New York State corporate tax law is that it applies to any corporation that does business in New York State. So if you're headquartered here or you're headquartered in South Florida, you pay New York State corporate tax law as long as your business is active in this state. And because we have such a strong economy, $1.3 trillion in New York State, we know that there's no business that's going to stop doing this work in our state because the economy is too profitable for them. And ultimately, what we're talking about is raising the corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey, because right now there are, I think, more than a dozen states that have higher corporate tax rate levels than we do. And ultimately, what that's depriving us of is the ability to provide quality of life for New Yorkers. And I've actually spoken to a number of business owners who've also, they've shared their concerns, and they've also said that one of the challenges they face is the ability to retain workers because of how expensive it is for their workers to live in the city. And by making housing more affordable, by making childcare more affordable, because I think, I didn't understand the scale of this crisis until I was sitting with a few families who were telling me that their cost looks like $25,000 a year. It's more money to get childcare than it is to send your kid to CUNY. And if you don't have a city government that is taking care of families, that is making it easier to raise a family, you're going to have an exodus of those families. And that's what's been so concerning. Growing up as a New Yorker, it's a rite of passage to talk to my friends who grew up in this city. And as soon as they say they want to have kids, it's like Long Island is the next required word that comes out of their mouth, right? They don't see any way that they could live in this city any longer if they want to actually have that room to grow their family. And that's not acceptable for us as a city.
Especially for cops, they can't afford to stay in the city.
No, I mean it's a universal issue. And actually, I really appreciate what you're saying, Eric, about having a chance to have a conversation, because I'm happy to answer any and all questions. I also actually had a few that I wanted to ask both of you to get a better sense, just specifically about
absolutely your floor.
What the NYPD bureaucracy has looked like, especially administration to administration, and if you've seen any differences over the course of the Adams administration and whether from de Blasio to Adams.
If you want to go first, Eric?
No, you take a stab. I think it's a great question. Go ahead.
Has there been a difference between, it's funny, I'm not a fan of Bill de Blasio. I won't lie. I didn't agree with a lot of his policies. I didn't agree with his take on policing that, myself and Eric are both proponents of proactive policing, a broken window style, but not going out and just locking up people for the sake of locking people up. I'm talking about targeted police work. I'm talking about targeted areas of enforcement related to the highest crime areas. I'm not saying to just go out on a blanket and we have a homeless issue and let's go lock up all the homeless people on the train, which currently is what's happening under Eric Adams. Like, that's not the broken window style. So we weren't fans of Bill de Blasio, but I will say Bill de Blasio did not fancy himself the NYPD police commissioner, and he left the NYPD in pretty capable hands. The NYPD did not have an exodus under Bill de Blasio. There was not an exodus of employment. There was not an inability to retain and recruit candidates for the NYPD. And at some point, even though a lot of the stuff I didn't agree with that de Blasio supported, I will say in 2018, it was probably about the safest point in New York City history when you look at crime rates. As opposed to now when you switch over to Eric Adams, he appoints people who are his friends, who have proven
to the point of
who have proven themselves to have low integrity prior in their careers. All of them have stained horrible records that would have never achieved the rank that they had in any other version of the New York City Police Department, in a department that's been scarred with scandal. I mean, basically for its existence. He appointed people that would have never been appointed in that, and he himself runs the police department like he is the police commissioner. And under Eric Adams, we've seen complete mismanagement. We've seen a complete misuse of resources. He campaigned on that he was going to empty out administrative units in one police plaza, and he never did that. He actually increased them. He gave them the overtime. He misused the overtime budget. And every failure of the Adams administration, of the people that he appointed, has been brought down on the rank and file of the NYPD. And that has caused a mass exodus amongst officers, as well as the inability to recruit and retain, because when you lose your recruiting base, which is the people that are working, you're not going to get anybody to come to wants to be a cop. I mean, the majority of the best recruiters for the NYPD always was word of mouth. It was the cops on the street who wanted their children to be cops, their nephews, their nieces, their neighbors. And we've lost that in the city under the Eric Adams administration.
Have you felt a difference under specific commissioners over the administration, or do you see it as a thread?
Who's the commissioner? I mean, the commissioner's Eric Adams. We had 4 police commissioners. I mean, it's just a mishmash of incompetence and inept actions. And honestly, the only thing that I've seen come out of there is social media campaigns of showing what they've done, when actually, if you speak to any cop on the street, they're going to tell you a different story than what Eric Adams painted on his Off-Topic Tuesdays.
Well, I think it's a great question. First of all, I love it. So, in my opinion, that it was run so well. It was such a the NYPD was the go-to policing. It was the greatest of all time. It really was. And you can see under Bloomberg and under Ray Kelly, the NYPD was flourishing. And I think former Mayor Bill de Blasio got the residual effects of that NYPD. And I think that former Mayor Bill de Blasio took the NYPD to the edge of the cliff, and Eric Adams just drove it over the cliff, honestly. What we've seen at the time, and I'm a big advocate for it, was doing intrusive police work. And what is intrusive police work? It's actually engaging people. That's why I don't necessarily say proactive police work. I say it's intrusive, because sometimes we make arrests, sometimes we talk to people, sometimes we talk to people who suspect a crime. So it's intrusive, right? And that's the difference. That's the dichotomy between the shield that a police officer bears on their chest and a security guard. Security guard observes, reports, and repeats. A police officer has that shield and gives them the right to make observations, to be nosy, to be intrusive. And even just as someone looking around up at the buildings who may be a tourist, hey, you lost, just to have a conversation. And that's what intrusive police work is. But when we saw former Mayor Bill de Blasio, he really transitioned the police department to cops that became meek, timid, and docile. And they really didn't have the fortitude to be police officers, what we need. And that allowed a weak, inept police department. And Eric Adams was able to find weak, inept leadership that were just complete loyalists. And that's why we have a criminal enterprise at the upper echelon of the NYPD. We need strong people of integrity and good character to have a strong police department. Because, we hear it quite often. John loves to say it, that corruption is the default position for New York City. John, you love to say it, and that's true. Because if we allow weak and inept and insecure leadership of the NYPD, this is the byproduct and the outcome. And that's what we see under Eric Adams. And it's unfortunate, because we were the go-to policing. I've been traveling throughout the entire country. I'm in California right now. And it's unfortunate when I have conversations and I tell people I'm former NYPD, right away, like, wow, what is going on in that city? What is going on with that police department? No longer is it that sense of like, well, you can put your chest out. It's the NYPD. It's unfortunate. But I think, in the span of 12 years, we really destroyed the police department. We could see the type of police officers they're hiring, the leadership that we have, the legislation and policies that have been created. It's just an avalanche of amount of issues. We have to peel these back to get back to the fundamentals of policing. And that's why I agree. When it comes to homelessness, we can't necessarily arrest ourselves out of it. There has to be a solution. And there can be some social work involved. And to me, it's a full circle. Homelessness, mental abuse, and substance abuse, that's full circle. But I think that there is a purpose also for the police department. And the police department has to be the hierarchy of public safety in New York City. And that's my firm belief, and based on my anecdotal experience.
No, absolutely. I think the police have a critical role to play in creating public safety. And what we've done right now, to your point, is we've relied on the police to deal with every single failure of the social safety net. So if someone is homeless, if someone is experiencing a mental health crisis, we are tasking the police to deal with that. And it just becomes to a level where it's impossible to fulfill all of the existing responsibilities and the additional ones simultaneously. And I think when we talk about this larger conversation that John was introducing about retention and hiring, when I've looked into the stats of what is one of the largest statistically identified reasons for leaving the department, forced overtime is time and again shows up as part of that there's this, an inability to have a quality of life when you cannot predict what your days look like. And so much of that is intertwined with having to go on a number of calls that really should be handled outside of the NYPD, and allowing officers to focus on that which they were trained for, that which they actually signed up for. I sadly have to jump off to head to the next part of the day, but it's been such a pleasure to be here.
Before you go, let me hit you with two questions.
Go for it. Absolutely.
Two questions. We have someone on the chat, Marlon Bethel, right? Like yourself, first generation immigrant, NYPD police officer, rose to the rank of intelligence detective, terminated by the Eric Adams administration without due process, without a department trial, without ever being charged criminally or civilly for failure to take a vaccine. What are your thoughts on that? On your administration, would you hire Marlon Bethel back?
I struggle on this in that I think it is, on the one hand, can absolutely understand the frustration of someone who has lost their job in a time when the city is tearing apart so much of the same policies that were made at the height of COVID, and has arbitrarily decided which ones to keep and which ones to take. I mean, I'm right now in the state legislature pushing back against the governor's attempt to ban masks, which would sound ridiculous if I told you that a few years ago when it was illegal to not wear a mask. And to have all of this at the same time, I understand where that frustration comes from. On the other hand, I also do deeply feel the importance of following public health mandates in a pandemic emergency, especially when you're a public worker. So I think ultimately, if you ask me today, would I be hiring Marlon back? I think I would fall on the side of no, because of the concerns around the necessity of upholding that public health mandate. And yet I also don't want to pretend that this is simple or straightforward, because there are so many contradictions. And I think that one of the contradictions that really stuck with me was how we had a different set of rules for workers than we did for celebrities. And I think what New Yorkers want is consistency. So that's where I am today, but I understand it's not simple. It's not straightforward.
But again, this is not really a vaccine issue, in my opinion. This is a civil rights issue. This is a worker rights issue. This is someone that worked for 2 years prior to this mandate during a pandemic when most New Yorkers were in there, and was previously infected and had natural provable antibodies, which the CDC said were acceptable as to had the same level of protection that the vaccine did. This is more of a worker rights issue. So, sitting there and saying, oh, I care about homelessness, I care about worker rights, I care about the middle class, when we see a completely totalitarian dictate come down from a government that made absolutely no sense. Because like you just said it yourself, Kyrie Irving could play basketball, but Marlon Bethel couldn't go to work 2 years later. I mean, to me, it's kind of a hypocritical stance, in my opinion. How, because to me, this is not a vaccine issue at all. This is a civil rights, worker right issue. This set, honestly, New York City back, labor rights back, probably 100 years.
I mean, I hear you, and I understand the contradictions at the core of it. I think my concern comes from the likelihood of, that we could be in a new pandemic, and the necessity of following the public health guidance that we put forward in that pandemic. To the places where I absolutely hear you is the contradictions of the guidance that we've been given thus far, what we're continuing to uphold, what we're rolling back. But that's the central core, the tension that I have is, in that moment when the science has us believe that this is the most effective way to counter it, shouldn't we have public workers be the ones who are the first to showcase the necessity of taking that step?
Well, last question before you go, and I have to run. Obviously, I was coined as the most complaint cop by the under the NYPD by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. What would be your Civilian Complaint Review Board if you have one as New York City mayor?
I would have a Civilian Complaint Review Board. I would have one that has a stable amount of funding. because what we've had from year to year is a variation in what we're actually putting forward to allow it to continue its work. And I would defer to that board in the recommendations that it makes, because I think, Eric, to what you were saying earlier, there's a need for public excellence. There's a need for actually being able to take on questions of accountability and corruption. And I think one of the ways in which the public has seen that most especially with our city and the upper echelons of our police department is that you have a CCRB which puts forward recommendations and then they are just tossed aside. So that's been my view on the CCRB.
And why do you want to get rid of the deputy mayor of public safety? I saw that in your community safety plan. What was up with that? Like, what's your rationale behind that?
I think the rationale is that the most important thing for me is outcomes, that we actually deliver public safety. And a lot of what Eric Adams has created, a lot of the positions he's created, the names sound as if they're in line with what we want, but really it's just another example of patronage, just another position that he can slot somebody into that he's worked with for decades. And for me, I want to make sure every single dollar is actually delivering the outcome. And ultimately, what I would just say in that it's been a pleasure to be here and I would love to come back is that I think New Yorkers, the thing that they hate more than a politician they disagree with is one they can't trust. And what you can always count on me to say is the same thing on this show that I'll say anywhere in this city, because I think it's important if we want to move the city forward, we understand where we disagree, we find the nuance in it and actually tackle it. Because even just raising the question about Marlon, it gives a little bit more depth to what is simply sometimes put into almost like a buzzword kind of question of where do you stand on these issues, as opposed to, remembering the New Yorkers that are at the heart of all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, you're welcome back. We'd love to have you back to speak on your Department of Community Safety, because I think it's very nuanced, and I'd love to pick your brain on that. So I know you got a couple of forums. There are some forums that are around that this whole stuff. We'd like to get you there as well. So have your team reach out. We'll have you back on.
Absolutely, I'd love that. Thank you, guys.
Zohran Mamdani, I appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully you come on again. We have a lot more unfinished business. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, guys. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Well, listen, we're not going to agree with a lot of things that he said, but the bottom line is we got to hear from him. I think there's a lot of unfinished business. Hopefully we have him on again, get further into his public safety. I'd love to, speak more on the Civilian Complaint Review Board. It appears to me that he would want the Civilian Complaint Review Board to have the last say in discipline. We didn't get into that, but that's kind of the take I got from what he said. I'm confident that he would rather have the Civilian Complaint Review Board make a final determination rather than the police commissioner. So right now, the Civilian Complaint Review Board is a suggestion, but it's very suggestive when you're general population NYPD. If you're former Chief Madry, it's weighted much different. But there's a lot more stuff that we have to get into. Unfortunately, we didn't even scratch the surface. We have a lot more conversation and a lot more to get into when it comes to his platform. But hey, at least we had an opportunity for him to come on, and at least he speaks from a place of honesty. I mean, we don't agree, obviously. Our brother Marlon is an outstanding investigator. He's outstanding on the job, off the job, super intelligent. It's a shame for the NYPD to lose him, but at least he was honest in his stance. It seems to me he might be malleable, maybe, after different conversations and going further, it seems like you could talk to him. But it seems to be that his position is what people thought at the time. And I think that, and it's separate from what they thought about mental health versus civil rights law. I think that's really what we have to get into is what is someone's civil rights? What are their employment rights rather than what's his best for mental health or medical health?
Yeah, I mean, everyone, when it comes to that issue, everybody always falls back on, it was the public health law. And what if there's another pandemic? Okay, what if there is another pandemic? Are you going to come up with an experimental thing and just make up stuff out of thin air? Because that's what happened. So, and if that's what happens again, yeah, people should not comply, and I think that's ultimately American at the foundation. When we talk about restoring integrity to New York City, it has to start at every level. You can't say, listen, that didn't look right, and that looked like corrupt, and it looked like we were kind of beholden to corporations and not the public health law and the people that created the public health law. What was his name? Dr. J. Varma, who was having drug-fueled sex orgies, deviant drug-fueled sex orgies, while telling you have to stand on two things to go to the grocery store, and you have to wear a mask before you could sit 2 feet away and sit down and take the mask off to eat. I mean, I want to talk about in store integrity. Like that was a mistake. That was horrible. What happened to Marlon, what happened to myself, what happened to all of us, whether you took it or not, it was honestly horrible. And what happened to our children should never happen again. That should never happen again in history. And honestly, like I respect anyone that's willing to have the conversation, but I don't know. You're willing to have the conversation, but do you want to deep dive into it? And I feel like the question for us was almost a filibuster, and I was kind of, it was a filibuster question. He kind of took out some time that we could have went into his Department of Community Safety, but he says he'll be back. I'll hold his word. He came, right? He said he was come on. He came on. So we'll go through that again. I'd love to deep dive into that, but again, I don't agree with that. And that take, that take is literally the take of everyone running on the Democratic line. And to me, it's like that. That's why they're a non-starter for me, because that's a totalitarian stance. When we talk about universal pre-K though, and everyone's like, I'm sorry, universal childcare though, everyone's like, that's socialism. Okay, so school's not, universal pre-K isn't. Like, what are you talking about? These are publicly funded goods. That's a form of socialism. I don't see anything wrong with, maybe there's a daycare at the school. Like, I wouldn't see anything like horrible about that. Like, he's a communist Marxist and I hate him for that reason, or whatever it is. Like, these are publicly funded goods. School is, a lot of people say school's childcare. A lot of people use school for childcare.
Listen, I'm glad we have an opportunity to speak to anyone, all walks of life. But I am disappointed at the same token that he came on and got off so quickly. I mean, he knows that this is a long form platform. He knows that we go into depth with and that we want to go into the public safety plan. So there was a lot of information that we didn't get to, and I mean, he's definitely well aware of that. He knows this is a long form platform, and typically we speak to candidates for about 2 hours. I get it. He's pressed for time, but hopefully we get back here at another time. I'd like to dive more deep into it. There's a lot of unfinished business. I want to know really what he thinks about CCRB. That's one thing I do like about Jim Walden. Jim Walden has already said he would completely remove CCRB and they would fall under the Department of Public Integrity and have a new formation of it. So that already intrigued my, enticed me just hearing that. And he's already said he's willing to bring back vaccinated workers. So again, I'm not opposed to everything he said, but at the same token, that's what's great about this platform, is hearing people from all their root causes and exactly, what they're thinking. So I haven't endorsed anybody yet, but it's nice to hear from them.
So there was a couple of points we wanted to hit with him that we didn't. So one, I'm going to hit him with you. Let's just go through them ourselves. Should a New York City mayor be weighing in on an overseas conflict when we talk about Israel-Palestine? New York City is the home, probably the largest Jewish communities in the world, other than Israel, they say. Some say even more than Israel. And then the same holds true for Palestinians. There's a huge Palestinian community in New York City as well. We're both friends with Palestinians and Israelis and Jews and Muslims. Like, we've worked alongside of them. We grew up with them, friendly with them, almost family with them. Well, shouldn't New York City mayor be weighing in on that? Should that be something, in your opinion, that a New York City mayor should get involved in?
I'm glad you brought that up, right? So John and I talked about specific things that we wanted to get into when it comes to Zohran Mamdani. So these are a lot of unfinished questions that we need to get into. So we say it all the time. Listen, I have a lot of roots from Israel. I've had a lot of family members that went to school in Israel. I had a lot of family members that had dual citizenship that served in the military Israel. But America first. I live in America. America first, and especially I grew up in New York City. New York City first. That's the old joke. Arguably, there are more Jews in New York City than there are in Israel. I think the total population in Israel is maybe a little bit over 2 million. So there might be more Jews in Israel. But the bottom line is it's America first and New York City first. No, I don't think a New York City mayor should be weighing in on world politics, especially when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's too much nuances and people are too sensitive when it comes to the situation. And I don't think that anybody really knows. We date back and we go back to the early days of the 20th century of how everything started, how everything played out with Israel and Palestine. I don't think it's something we should get into. We should keep New York City residents safe. And I don't care. New York City, same thing. I had friends that were Palestinian on the job, friends that were Jewish. It doesn't matter. To me, they were just fellow police officers and they were brothers. I didn't care what they were. Not something the mayor should get into at all.
I agree. And then when it comes to the protest, you're allowed to protest. But whatever side of the protest you're on, if you step out of line, guess what? You're getting locked up. Here are your boundaries. I don't care if I agree with you or I don't agree with you. Here are the boundaries. These are the boundaries. This is how you will act in a society. You won't interfere with businesses. You won't interfere with critical infrastructure. You won't stop everyday New Yorkers and tourists and people that are coming in. And you're not stopping the free flow of traffic. The minute you do that, whether I agree with you or not, we're coming in, we're locking you up, you spend the night in jail. Like that's the stance the mayor has to have. You know, I mean, like, you know, people want to talk to me often about the Israeli and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I'm like, I don't have an opinion on it really. I know what's. I know that I'm not pro-war. Like I don't like wars. If there's something that we could do to alleviate it, do it. But I don't know enough about it. I know what happened on October 7th was absolutely horrible. Should never happen anywhere, anyone. And I understand Israel's response to it. But at the same time, I can understand innocent people that are directly involved saying their response is too heavy-handed. War's horrible, right? So I don't support it. I don't know enough about it. Didn't really want to get into it, and I don't think that a New York City mayor should be. If you're running for New York City, you should be New York City first. That's it. That's it. You New York City resident first. And if you're not supporting Marlon Bethel, you're not New York City resident first, in my opinion. Guy is basically his neighbor. Basically same upbringing, you know. I mean, how could you say, like, what did Marlon do that was wrong? Ask for an FDA approved version? Like, that's so horrible. I'll take it. Just I want an FDA approved version. Couldn't get it because New York City wasn't giving it. You know, thing didn't make sense. And by the way, in school, like they require you to get shots, right? But you could show tithers. You could go get your tithers tested and show that as proof to not require you to get the shot to attend school. Why the hell did that change all of a sudden during COVID? Made no sense. So like we had antibodies, we showed the antibodies. New York City said, no good, right? Because we're not gonna pay that. We need to get these corporations in there. We need to get that in you. Like made absolutely no sense. Other thing, 30, I forget the exact amount of dollars. He wanted to raise minimum wage. What'd you think about that?
We spoke about that, right? So he wants to raise minimum wage to $30 an hour. Now, I don't agree with the corporations, but there's a problem with that because you get a corporation like McDonald's will say, you know what? F you. I was intending to pay the employees $28 an hour, but now that you force us to pay them $30, we'll just hire less employees and we'll figure out how to move forward. And that's what the corporations do. You know, a lot of people think, oh, it's great. Raise the minimum wage. I don't think it's a good thing when you raise the minimum wage because these corporations, they just run from it and move away from it. Instead of saying, okay, we'll hire these people, have to pay them $30, they find ways to actually conduct business without hiring as many people. If you leave the minimum wage alone, it actually makes it better. You're actually, it hurts the economy when you raise the minimum wage. It doesn't actually help it.
Well, I mean, you know, so to me, I'm like, again, I think the middle class always getting screwed. You know, I said it when we were on here. I'm like, I think I'm against everybody at this point. I'm team nobody. I'm like, and you know, if you would have spoke to me 3 weeks ago, I'd be like, terrible idea, raise minimum wage. But now when I think about it, I'm like, you know what? Whatever happens in New York City, I'm bearing the brunt of it. Whatever happens globally or nationally, Trump with the tariffs, whatever happens, I'm bearing the brunt of it. So why should I not make the money as well? You know, and you know, when we talk about raising minimum wage or we talk about like what's the difference between raising salaries elsewhere? Somebody's always bearing the brunt, you know, and who's always bearing the brunt of it? It's always us. And, you know, for too long, I think I've been on the side of big corporations when I shouldn't have been because they're not on our side. Do I want to hurt the mom and pop businesses? Absolutely not. I personally don't think government should be involved in dictating businesses. Same way I don't think that he should tell me whether I can or can't raise the rent, which he's not doing, but he's doing it with rent stabilized apartments. Right. And so there are people that are similar in rent stabilized apartments to me that are barely getting by. And this is affecting them as well. So it's not just this big corporation take on things. So, I mean, I see both sides of it, but ultimately I fall on the side of I'm only against it because I believe that government should not dictate what business does.
Yeah, but the problem is exactly what you said. Who pays the burden, right? So, that loaf of bread that you pay for is more expensive right now because someone has to stock it in the back. Someone has to drive it to its location. Someone has to bring it to you. And now they have to be paid $30 an hour. Yeah. Now they got to be paid $30 an hour. So who's paying for that? It's not the corporation paying for it. It's the consumer. So the burden becomes on the consumer. And unfortunately, if you look at the tax breakdown, I read this great book called Tax-Free Wealth. It's kind of boring, but it's a great book and really understand how taxes work in this country, right? And there's like a 4-tiered system. And it starts, if you're an investor, you pay the least amount of taxes. And then it's big business, small business, and then employees. And employees is what we were working for the NYPD or anybody else. You pay the most amount of taxes. And according to the book, that about 5 months out of the year is for taxes. So if you actually break it down, and I wrote it, and I started breaking it down myself. You actually get paid 7 months out of the year. It's pretty sad. So who pays? The consumer pays. The consumer pays with their taxes. The consumer pays when they actually buy things. I just want to go back to what I was saying, right? I think that, I think in some ways he's kind of malleable, but I do think that he didn't seem to be too flexible in a sense. Like, okay, let's put aside, let's talk about Marlon again, right? So let's put aside Dr. J. Varma. Let's pretend that never happened. Let's pretend we had no idea about this guy having sex-fueled parties while people are locked down.
Deviant,
right?
You gotta put deviant.
What he said, if you think about what he said before, he said that at the time, this is what everybody thought. And I got the sense what he was saying was because Marlon didn't comply at the time, why should I hire him back? Would he comply again? That's the sense I got. But we've learned, not just through Jay Varma and other reasons, that it's wrong. It's wrong because it's just against the law. It violated employment rights. And we've learned through science and different other avenues of science that it's just it didn't make a difference. And people had antibodies. So that's the part I'm kind of disappointed that he didn't seem too flexible in the sense that, hey, let's look at things now in comparison to before. And I got the impression, I'm curious if you got the impression that that if there's another mandate, would Marlon comply or would anybody else comply?
But I think that's exactly what he said. But it's very hypocritical stance from someone saying you're trying to empower the working class. And that's the whole thing. And I'm like, wait, I don't understand. Are we fighting back against for the small guy or are we not? Is that to say that everything that New York City does is right? No, he's talking about how he's pushed back at a lot of the stuff New York City is doing. Right. So it's like it's a very hypocritical stance. I don't understand. I don't understand the Democratic candidates who aren't seeing through this. You say you support unions. You say you support labor. You say you support individuals. You support the poor and the middle class. But they have to do everything government tells them when the government tells them, even though it makes no sense, even though it's illegal. And even though everything they're telling you was made up in thin air, so it's like, I don't know, man. I just, like I said, I think it's a completely hypocritical stance. And that's why, like, honestly, like, I always say I'm politically homeless, but I'm definitely not a Democrat. and that's why, because the Republicans are full of shit. And I always say it, they're a bunch of gaslighters. When I look at the Democrats, like what they present as their core values falls on their face when you get into COVID or anything when you disagree with them on any other matter for that. So I'm like, I don't get it. Marlon says it here. He talks about taxing corporations, yet is pro big pharma mandates. I mean, it's completely hypocritical, dude. It's like, I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, I'll agree. I'm shaking my head. I'm listening to him. I'm like, yeah, no, I agree with you. And then he's like, yeah, no, but I wouldn't hire him back though. I'm like, what?
That was the point.
It's honestly, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me.
That was the part where he lost me also, right? Because I think he was trying to make an analogy in the sense that he was saying that celebrities, were measured differently with the vaccine in comparison to New York City workers. And he kind of said that wasn't right, but then he said he wouldn't hire Marlon back. But yet there was a different standard at the point. I just don't understand why he wasn't flexible since I say, okay, I understand at the point, you made a determination in your head. Yeah, it's not funny. But you made a determination in your head that people should comply for safety purposes. But what about the stuff that we learn now? And to me, what it sounds like is just he wants people compliant. But also, is it because Marlon was a cop? Would it be a different conversation if we're just talking about New York City workers, or was it because he was a cop? And we didn't get a chance to get into it, and that's where I think, unfortunate. He came on. He ran quick. I'm sure he knew what he was doing. I mean, he knows this is a long form platform. He was in and out in 20 minutes.
Listen, I'm not gonna knock him. He came on, like he said, he'll come back on. I'll take his word for it. He is a busy guy. I mean, he's all over the place. Got a bunch of events scheduled today. So I'm he's the leading candidate for New York City mayor. So like, I'm not. But he definitely filibustered us with the question, and we both took the hook, line, and sinker. So next time
we got another hour to go.
Next time we ain't answering your questions or anybody else's questions. But
Paperboy Prince was here for 3 hours. I figured, okay, we got enough time. But he definitely, you got to answer questions. All right, time to go.
We were like,
we got sucking.
So the other thing, and I wanted to ask him about this. And I know Cafecito's on here too. City-run grocery stores. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, to me, I think unfortunately, city-owned grocery stores kind of reminds me of what happened in Russia. That was a complete epic fail. I mean, who's going to pay for that? Who goes to these stores? Is there going to be anything left in these stores? And we didn't get a chance to go into that. Is this a breakdown based on your economic status? Is this open to everyone? We just seen that in complete communism, and it's an epic fail. I don't see how that would work. It just doesn't make sense. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, if there's things in place, like, all right, you're on food stamps, I could see there being a place for you to go. But what type of food is going to be there? Is it going to be high quality food? Is it going to be low quality food? Again, I'll always push back on is there money? Because there's money to get millions of dollars in embroidered items for the Adams administration. There's millions and millions of dollars for cops to walk around like they have their own entourage, like they're celebrities, protection details, drive fancy cars. So there's money for all those things. There's money for this. There's money to feed the poor. You know what I mean? So like, I won't ever say there's not money. Like, money's being misused, and I'll agree. And he said it. He said it there. He said, I believe that money's being misused. I don't think there's anybody in New York City that doesn't think that money's being misused. Money's being high. Billions of dollars are being misused. So, but if, I don't see how, it would be a feudal enterprise. Obviously, you would be losing money on it, because how could you control the price of goods that you don't control? You can't. So if you're going to say, well, I'm going to keep these items at this price, and this is part of the welfare system, only the people that make under this are entitled to it, I could kind of get behind it. You know what I mean? I could kind of get behind anything. We're wasting $1 billion a year to solve mental illness and homelessness, and we're not doing anything. We're just basically, you could use it to heat yourself in the winter better. You could take it out of money in cash and burn it, and to heat yourself in the winter, and it would be better. It would be better used, because it's going out the window right now. People are just getting rich for no reason. So I'm like, so I could see good and bad in it. Do I think it's a mainstream thing? Absolutely not. It's fucking complete complete failure. I mean, read the Gulag Archipelago when when Stalin's Russia tried to do that. Read what happened. But they tried to do that on a full scale. You know, if you're doing it for low income or people like that, I might be able to get behind it. Depends how it is.
Well, that's my point. We didn't get a chance to get into it and find out, is there a tiered system? Is there a breakdown of who actually goes there? Because in Russia, you know what happened? There was no bread left. There was nothing to eat. It didn't work. It was, so it sounds great. You know, it sounds good. Hey, free food at the grocery store, but for who? For who? I suspect it would be more of a breakdown based on economic status, because I can't see an actual city-owned grocery store for everyone, and there's food left. I don't see that working. But let's get into some other stuff. I wanted to talk to them also about this whole thing with hate speech and hate crimes. I mean, we're really drawing a fine line of what is hate speech and what's hate crimes, because from what I read on his platform, he wants homeless to be their own class. So if you attack a homeless person, if there's a crime committed against someone homeless, that would be a hate crime. And I think, John, we really explore this. Like, why is anything a hate crime? I don't like it. I wouldn't like someone to say, excuse me, you're a dirty Jew, and then hit me. I mean, of course, I'd hit him back, but does it make a difference, if he says it or not? I was hit. I mean, if you attack a homeless person, does it make a difference if they're homeless or not? But he wants that to be a hate crime. I don't know. We're really crossing some fine lines when we talk about all these hate crimes and hate speech. You and I both know. We speak about this all the time. We don't believe in hate speech. You don't like what people say, don't listen to it. But it's really getting to a fine line of everyone's going to be a class now. You drive a red car. Don't attack anybody with a red car. I don't know.
Well, I think the bigger thing when I look at anyone talk about hate crimes and they want to get rid of Asian hate, or they want to get rid of anti-Semitism, or they want to get rid of anti-Muslim hate, they want to get rid of hate. I'm like, how are you doing that without bringing down crime? How is that not a part of your how are you just honing in? Like, I'm going to stop hate crimes against whoever, the homeless. I don't care. You can make everybody a protected class, in my opinion, because I do think at some point, everybody really is in a protective class. The police officers aren't in a protective class, but they should be, right? They should be. They should say, well, I'm being discriminated against because I'm a police officer when it comes to Title VII issues, when it comes to civil rights issues. I'm being discriminated against because I'm a white Christian male. I'm being discriminated against. Like, if you can make the claims, like everyone's in there, you could throw homeless in there, throw cops on there too. But when we talk about hate crimes, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible that somebody feels emboldened enough to come up and assault you for whatever reason it is, because you're a white male, because you're a female, because you're homeless, because you're gay, because you're trans, whatever it is. Horrible, 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 horrible. How is anyone how are you stopping that effectively without bringing down all crime? The reason these hate crimes, in my opinion, are flourishing, it's because it's an do anything you want type of environment that's been created by Democrats. That's what it is. I mean, like, that's why people are just getting randomly assaulted. It's not because, hate has risen. No, the devil's always been here. It's always been dumb, ignorant people. There's always been people who take advantage of weaker people. They're always going to be there. We're never going to get rid of it. The fact of the matter is, those people feel empowered that they could do whatever they want because we've emasculated the police and we've emasculated the line between good and evil. Oh, he just punched you in the face because he was having a bad day. I was having a bad day yesterday. I didn't punch anybody. I didn't raise my voice to anybody. I didn't start screaming at anybody. So I mean, I think, like, what do you think about that? Can you bring down hate crimes without bringing down all crime?
That's a good point. And the answer is no. And I think that I don't like when we start crossing hairs as far as hate speech and hate crimes. I think we need to get rid of that altogether. There shouldn't be any hate speech and any hate crimes. The bottom line is a crime is a crime. If you attack someone and assault them, you should be arrested and you should be convicted and prosecuted for those crimes. Does it really matter what's in someone's head? Are you going to change their mind? If someone is just comes from an environment and they're taught to hate, whether if they hate people for being gay, if they hate someone for being Jewish, are you going to change your mindset? No, that's not necessarily the case. but you could prosecute them and they could do their time for committing that crime. I think we really crossed some scary hairs when we talk about hate speech and hate crimes. I don't think there should be any of that. That's unfortunate. If you don't like what people say, you shouldn't listen. Now, there's a difference between threatening speech and harassing someone compared to hate speech. There's a big dichotomy there.
I mean, threats are completely different than saying I don't like you. You know what I mean? I'm going to kill you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like, that's completely different. It's crime. Free speech is it's not free speech is you're allowed to express yourself. You're not allowed to threaten people and try to intimidate them and cause harm to people. That's totally different. But, to say, well, I'm going to dedicate funding to bring down hate crimes. So what do you mean? What exactly are you going to be doing to bring down hate crime? This whole education thing, you're educating people that don't do it. I used to sit in these trainings, these implicit bias trainings, all this nonsense. And I'd be like, why are you like, this is insulting to me. This is insulting to me as a police officer. This is insulting to me as a man. This is insulting to me as a Christian that you're talking to me like I'm an idiot and that I'm a racist moron. You put these trainings out to the people who aren't committing these acts. You know who's committing the acts of the hate crimes, of the violence? Drug addicted, mentally ill, homeless people that we've left on the street to die. And are they traditionally hate crimes? Probably not. Probably the guy's just going through like some mental thing that he should have been taken off the street. He should have been in a hospital. He should have been getting medicine. He should have been getting care. And, we're failing these people. I told you guys before, I'm not going to bring up my cousin's name, but my cousin had a really high paying job with the city, made a lot of money, and he lost his mind. And when he lost his mind, he started taking drugs. And then guess what happened when he started taking drugs? He became homeless. Right? Now, he's considered schizophrenic. He's considered schizophrenic bipolar. He has his episodes. He doesn't need money. He makes a lot of money in disability. You would never know that he doesn't need money, though, because he's on the street, homeless, doesn't know where he is, doesn't know what he's doing. And New York City has failed him over and over again. So while my family chases him around the streets of New York, trying to get him in halfway houses and places to keep him off the drugs and to keep him off the street, often, in like family chats, oh, can we send money? And like, no, don't send him money. He's got plenty of money and money's not his issue. Like his issue is he doesn't have any place to go and he can't get treatment. Like that's his issue. He has plenty of money. If he could think right, he'd be fine. It's not the money. Like it's the fact that like there's no place, there's no system to help these people, right? Here you have a guy on the street, homeless, who actually has enough money and healthcare to probably be in a facility, but New York City's response to him is inept. So now guess what? He's a danger to you on New York City streets. He's a danger to your children, to your wife. Guess what? He might commit a hate crime. I know him for my whole life. He's not a hateful person. He doesn't hate anybody. But when he's in his right mind, when he's not in his right mind, guess what? A lot of the way he acts is going to come off to hate to whoever's in his face. So, we've failed, and, I didn't know about Jim Walden, but I saw he posted about it. His sister was actually failed. His sister actually died on New York City streets, homeless, drug addicted, and was murdered. These are real life consequences for people. And I don't believe we're given real world results to it. We're putting tags on things, hate crimes, this, that. And we're not getting down to the core issues of why this happened. We're not making the connection. We're breaking all these issues up and pretending they're all separate things when they're all one and the same. Failure in public safety.
Listen, these are things you're supposed to learn in the home, right? Not to teach your kids hate. Teach your kids to be respectful to all walks of life and to respect how people live their lives. These are things that are taught in the home. By the time people are in adulthood, if they're out committing a crime, if it's a hate crime, whatever, it's a little bit too late at that point. We have to address the crime in itself. As I said, the education starts in the home. We talk about school, of course, but I think the most foundational education is what is learned at home. I'm sure the same thing for you, John. I teach my kids to respect all, to love everybody, and my kids have been all over. So they've been around with all different types of kids, and they've been exposed to everything. And that's really where it starts. It starts in the home. And again, I think that it almost reminds me of like this whole idea of racial profiling. Like, how do you know what's going on in a cop's head? How is a civilian complaint review board investigating any racial profiling cases unless the cop says, I stopped this person because they're black, which no cop is ever going to say that. And I've never worked with anybody that actually thought that. Unless, I'm not saying it's impossible. Is there a racist cop out there somewhere? I'm sure there is. But how do you determine what is going on in that person's head? So it's similar to also when it comes to hate crimes. Does it make a difference what's in that person's head? Yes and no. But can we change what's in that person's head? We have to address the actual crime itself and what was committed, what the infraction was, and what the damage was. You can't. This is a minority report. Start guessing what's inside people's brains and what they're thinking. It's absolutely ridiculous. A crime is a crime. Especially really when it comes to hate speech. I hate this idea of hate speech. It's even in the disciplinary matrix with the NYPD, hate speech. It's ridiculous. What is hate speech? What is that? I don't.
Anything you say that I don't like.
That's what I'm saying. We talk about it all the time.
Anything you say I don't like.
What is that? Especially like in the NYPD world. What is hate speech?
Yeah.
If I say I don't like John because he's bald, is that hate speech?
Yeah.
What is that?
I'm a protected class, follically challenged.
Bald guys.
I'm thinking about growing the Hogan. What do you guys think? If I grow my hair long, do the Hulk Hogan and I wet it?
You said that this morning. I was thinking,
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to go through before we jump off. I just kind of want to breeze through his community, his Department of Community Safety report. He has a organizational chart up on there where you could see it. It's almost right in the beginning of the report, right when you scroll down. It shows the Department of Community Safety, and you see underneath it is the Division of Public Safety, the Division of Victims Assistance and Community Repair, the Division of Community Health, the Office of Violence Prevention, the Office of Strategic Initiatives, the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes, the Office of Ending Gender-Based Violence. Isn't that similar to a hate crime? The Office of Crime Victim Services, the Offices of Community Health. Eric, do you see anybody missing in this community safety department?
I mean, we have to put down every class. Again,
No, but I'm saying, like, shouldn't the NYPD be alongside or in this organization? Like, where does this, like, if we're going to talk about public safety, if we're going to say this is a part of the public safety plan, and we're going to say that NYPD officers play a vital role in that, right? They play a vital role in that. Where are they in your org chart? Like, where do they fall?
That was my point to the conversation that we had earlier and offline. I wanted to get into, where does the NYPD play a pivotal role in his community safety team? Are they at the hierarchy? Because we did speak to him very briefly. He did mention he believes that the NYPD is important and critical. But are they at the hierarchy? Are the men with the guns? Or are we going to this UK-style policing where it's going to be civilian-based and men without guns? And then when things get so critical, the men with guns come in. This is a problem here. I mean, that's why I really want to get into it with him. We can't run away from it. This country was built on gun culture. It was built on two things: guns and horses. This country was built on guns and horses. That's how we transported stuff, and everyone carried a gun. And that's built on gun culture, and it's not a bad thing. It's just part of our society, and we need men with guns out there doing policing. This idea of the civilian-based model actually creates more problems. You know, I was watching this thing on social media yesterday, and this cop said exactly what I say all the time. We have put so much emphasis on civilian-based type models of getting involved with policing and this whole thing of de-escalate, that we've done so much de-escalating that we've actually escalated the situation. Because we're so hesitant and we don't want to use firearms and we don't want to use force and we're de-escalating, that we end up using more force rather than if we had a situation and this cop was talking about, you know, when you have a domestic violence situation and you get that maybe a husband and wife argument, and the husband's pissed off that the cops are there, and he starts to ball up his fist and he starts to clench his jaw. And what does a good cop know? Game is on, right? And what did we do back in the day? That guy was getting tackled right away. Tackled, put handcuffs on, dust him off, he's good to go. But now because we de-escalate so much and we talk, sir, calm down, sir, calm down, sir, calm down, that eventually now he wants to strike you or he wants to pull something out to hurt you. And now we're using tasers and we're using firearms. So we've done so much de-escalating that we escalate the situation because we don't want the men out there with the guns.
Yeah. Stay Trained Up says Zohran is not even going to be a cliff note in this race with his acquiesced thinking. You know, I just want to remind everybody on here. In my opinion, I already told you the best campaign ad was Paperboy Prince, without a doubt. He wins hands down. The best campaign overall, Zohran Mamdani. If you believe those polls, I mean, I don't know. I did you watch the 2020 polls? Did you watch the 2024 polls? Did you believe any of those? Because I didn't. And guess what? You were right, right? You were right, right? And then did you believe? You know, so it's like 2016 polls. Remember those? 0% chance of Donald Trump winning, and then he becomes the president of the United States. I don't believe polls. They could be skewed. You look at the poll numbers. Oh, I polled 600 people on the street. Did they even live in New York City? Like, who are they? I'm not buying those polls. You know what I'm buying? I'm buying that fundraising. I'm buying when you're looking at Zohran Mamdani getting those, destroying these candidates, these people who are considered political juggernauts. Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, Scott Stringer, Adrian Adams. He didn't beat them. He destroyed them. If this was a basketball game, it would be 34-0. Andrew Cuomo would have 4 points. You know, he took in these small campaign donations. These are from New York City residents. What's New York City's major problem? Getting people out to vote. Zohran Mamdani's base is not going to have that problem. Believe me, they're going to come out to vote, and they're going to come out to vote in numbers. And regardless if he wins the Democratic primary or not, he is going to be on that ballot. So if Andrew Cuomo comes out as a Democratic candidate and Zohran comes out as a working family candidate, and now you have Eric Adams on the independent line, and you have Jim Walden on the independent line, and you have a Curtis Sliwa, you have 5 candidates running. The race is wide open. Who, in my opinion, has the strongest base is going to win? That's Zohran Mamdani. Anybody discounting him because you don't like what he's saying, you're making a very bad mistake. You're making a very bad mistake. You're not looking at the big picture. He is a formidable candidate. He has probably, in my opinion, the best shot to win out of everybody on that field.
I'm glad you brought that up about the polls. I say the same thing. Like, who actually does these polls? Like, I sometimes like, who, where they get this poll from? Where they get this information from? It doesn't even appear to be legit. It's all nonsense. I think that he's actually the juggernaut in this, Zohran Mamdani. But what that says to me, right? In this short conversation that we have a lot of issues we didn't touch on. But in this short conversation, it tells you what New York City workers want, or New York City residents want at this time. And his base, to me, appears to be, it is New York City workers, and it's probably middle class and low income, also people that are tired of facing New York City, wants to tax the rich. And I agree with Marlon. You know, I understand what you're saying. And New York City is the economic hub, and they have to do business in New York City. But do they actually have to be in New York City, especially with virtual employment right now? It's easy enough for a big corporation to pick up and go to Texas and put a building there. And you don't even need much real estate anymore to have a big business. Some small real estate, you could do a lot of your stuff virtually. You can do a lot of stuff by Zoom and not pay those taxes. So this idea of taxing the rich and helping the poor, we've seen this song and dance many times before. And it's unfortunate. We can't necessarily just say, oh, we're going to tax the rich. And he said someone that makes $1 million a year or more. Is $1 million even a lot anymore at this point? Yes, it's a substantial amount compared to a cop. If you make $300,000, you're middle class. So $1 million, are you rich in New York City? Not necessarily rich. It's good money, but you're not rich either. So this is a problem.
Yeah, and then just to go back on his community safety plan, he also has these transit, I forget what he calls them, transit specialists or transit workers, like a civilian-based transit employee. What he's saying is they're going to use the empty retail space in MTA to institute this these outreach programs inside of the subway. Again, I think when I look at the community safety plan, what fails here to me is where is the coordination with the NYPD? That's what I'm not seeing. I don't see anything in here where they're going to be coordinating with the NYPD. What? In my opinion, the Love Team was better, well thought out, because what they understood in the Love Team is this: you need the police with you. Again, the police don't have to be. They shouldn't be. Right? The uniform's intimidating. We're not nice guys. People don't think we're nice. We have an intimidating look. We stand intimidating, or at least we used to. Guy with a muscular build, two guys with muscular build, standing in the background looking like you better do what this lady's telling you. But it's very important that they're there or readily accessible. Because what's going to happen, and what people will come to find out quickly, is if he does get elected and this does go into place, is these social workers are going to be working hand in hand with the police, because you're going to need the police there to prevent you from being assaulted or to stop an assault once it's occurring. It can't be, I agree with some of the civilian take on things. I do. I agree with some of the Democratic take on things, that like the approach to dealing with mentally ill and homeless has to be more nuanced than what Eric Adams is doing. Just go lock everybody up. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? You're not solving anything. You're not helping anything. You're actually making things worse, So, but like, you have a plan to basically get rid of the NYPD's response to it. And I agree, there are things that we shouldn't be dealing with. Like, I don't know why we're dealing with most stuff that we deal with. I don't. There should be people that, in where I am in Florida, they have like these community safety cops or whatever they're called. They're basically civilians. They assist on like traffic accidents, on road details, on things like this. They're community-based. They're community-based people, right? Like they don't take enforcement towards you. They don't give you a traffic ticket. They just kind of assist. And it's pretty effective, man. It's pretty effective of like not having to spend the big bucks on police officers and not having that authoritative presence there consistently. So I think when you're dealing with the mentally ill and homeless, there's some portions of it that are good, but to sit there and write the NYPD off, which that's based upon what I'm reading, that's what it seems like to me, I think is completely short-sighted and not really weighing down on the issues.
Yeah, listen, I have to agree in a sense that the police department became this entity that they want cops involved in everything. And there's some things that we just don't need to be there. And it stems even, not just this administration, not even former Mayor Bill de Blasio, but back when we had Ray Kelly as the commissioner and Bloomberg as the mayor. I remember, I'm sure John remembered also, as a cop, they started to have police officers respond to carbon monoxide alarms. And I remember saying, why are we responding to carbon monoxide alarms? And I want to help anybody, but that's something completely for the fire department. I don't see any reason why the police need to respond. But of course, they wanted the police involved in everything. So you can see how this is stuff that happens over years where the police are involved in every single thing, and I understand it. And now we've got these Democrats that are trying to move so far away from the police department and move everything to civilian base. So the tip of the scales have really swayed too far. I think that there is some room and opportunity for civilian entities to work hand in hand with the police department, but it should be supplemental to contribute and be an attributing factor to help the police department. The police department should be the hierarchy, and the police department should be the focal point of policing. And if there's some civilian-based stuff to assist the police officers, maybe the civilians play a role in follow-up. Initial response to most incidents should be the police. Even when it comes to homeless, when it comes to emotionally disturbed, it should be the police to make the initial response in case there's any potential for violence. And we know that a 911 call is a mystery. We never know actually what plays out until you respond to that 911 call and what actually plays out. I've had many times, John, I'm sure you've had it too. I'm sure many of our active retired members of law enforcement throughout this country know exactly what I'm talking about. I've had numerous times where people call 911, and it turns out that's my perpetrator, and that person I actually arrested numerous times, right? Because we don't know what's behind the curtain, what's happening at a 911 call. So I think for the majority of things, the NYPD should be the initial response, and then we can have the civilians to do follow-ups, to do a follow-up on someone's emotionally disturbed. Yes, I mean, I've had instances, I'm sure you have the same thing, where we constantly respond to the same home of an EDP. What's EDP? Someone who's an emotionally disturbed person. Constantly the police department's responding, right, to the same incident, someone that we know doesn't have a propensity for violence. That's something where a civilian role could now fall into. I think they should be doing follow-up work, not the initial response.
So I would push back, and I would say, like, honestly, if I was in charge, I would create a team, and there would be security there, probably a team of 3 or 4 cops, and then there would be multiple cars with some type of psychiatrist or social worker rolling around with them, oversaw by a sergeant with a team that encompasses each precinct every night. And they should be the ones that respond to these EDP jobs, right? And if something's turning sideways, they should be the one to respond. They should respond to the disorderly groups. They should be the ones to respond to the mentally ill or the people camping out on the street or in transit, and have a specialized unit to deal with the mentally ill and the homeless. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that form of response. I think that could work. Instead of having these teams to go out and chase cars, I think we should segue in onto what actually the problems are facing and deep dive down into it. And I think, like, I wouldn't have a problem with an initial response from a specialized unit. It was funny, like, what Paperboy Prince was saying, but it was actually pretty smart. And it was like the love team, like, it's funny, love tickets, it's a joke. But when you really deep dive down into it, having a team of qualified professionals that's all they do all day long, I think that's the way to go, honestly. I don't think some rookie who's afraid of his own shadow or some disgruntled cop should be the first person who's got his own mental issues responding to mentally ill and homeless is the best way. And what we see right now is they're failing miserably at it. We're creating this Q team. We have the CRT teams. We have the transit teams. Why not break them up into sectors and throw a social worker with them and have them roll around? Answer the 911 jobs. Let the cops handle the burglary calls, all the other calls.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. It's a good idea, I think, in theory, to have a team. But the problem is, you work at some of these large precincts, and you can easily have an emotionally disturbed person on one side of the precinct and another emotionally disturbed person on the other side of the precinct simultaneously. Could that team actually address those issues at the same time? I think that the police officers doing the 911 responses is suffice. I think the NYPD, even now, is the best when it comes to dealing with emotionally disturbed people because of just the vast volume. It's always been the best of the business. And I think that we could have psychiatrists and such doing follow-ups. And the reason why I say is because initial response, it could cause a problem. Again, when I say about this whole idea of de-escalating to the point where escalating, we have a team of psychiatrists there, and it could be some confusion with the police as far as when to take action, how to take action. So I think the police officers need to be there with the initial response, do their job, keep people safe, keep things under control, and then we can always summons a social worker team to the location to do a follow-up, even in real time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anything else you want to touch on, Zohran? I mean, he ran in, he filibustered us, we bit. Anything else? I just got one more thing before we get out of here. Anything else on Zohran's thing before we get off? I got one more thing after that.
No, I'm just laughing because he got us good. I figured.
Is Eric frozen or is it me?
No, I'm not frozen, am I? I just figured we had like a good solid 2 hours. He got us good.
Well, you are.
Guys, what's that? He's like, let me have these guys answer questions.
So I'm gonna learn that. I'm gonna learn if I ever run for office. I'm gonna learn the filibuster. So what do you think about that?
I figured. You know what? After answering that question, then we could start getting to the Department of Public Safety team. Right? That was segue into it. And then, all right, I gotta go. We got played. Let's go into what did you want to go into?
Buttering him up. He's like, all right, I'm running out of here.
Yeah, these guys are slick.
You said Zohran had John and Eric doing the mannequin challenge. Listen, you got us, bro. You got us. I can't, it is what it is. All right. So I think last thing before we jump out of here, we spoke about it last week, MTA versus NYPD. Check out that episode. We had Tremel Thompson on. I don't think it could be stated enough that like the inept response by the management to a social media video. Like a social media video of old photos, by the way. So, all right, some guys had slept in transit, and Tremel wasn't lying. Like he said, those were old videos. I've been putting that stuff out for a while now, and he has. Like we had argued previously about that, and I think it was like over a year ago when that happened, maybe even longer. And then as a result of a social media post that Tremel Thompson puts out, vice president of TWU, Transit Worker Union, NYPD says, all right, no transit cops are allowed to take breaks in MTA transit rooms. Sounds great. The problem is these guys are working 12 to 16-hour shifts, and there's absolutely nowhere to go in most of these transit stations. There's nowhere to go topside to take a break. They're entitled to 1-hour meal, to 15-minute breaks. And I think, you got guys working overnight, or some places even in the day, there's no place to go. What do you expect these guys to do? And like, as much as I want to pick on just the leadership, and I think it was a complete knee-jerk, inept action on Jessica Tisch's part and the chief of NYPD Transit's part, I think, I also got to say about how inept the response and representation is. There is no representation. There's multiple unions that are involved in this. The ones that are affected the most are the DEA and the NYPD, in the PBA. And I haven't heard boo from them. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, we have all these people reaching out to us in the background, like, oh, could you guys help us? We have no place to go. We're standing there 12, 16 hours. We don't know what to do. We're taking breaks on post. What do we do? And I'm like, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what else we could do. Like, we put posts out, we talked about it. What do you think about that, Eric? Is like, would that be your response? Like, you catch a video, you're the police commissioner, you catch a video of a couple of guys sleeping in transit. Now you're going to say nobody can take a break? It's basically what they said. You can't take a break.
Oh, that's exactly what they said, because there's nowhere for them to go. Where are they going to go in transit? They have to go to some room. And that's the part where I thought Tremel was being flexible in a sense. He said, I understand that the cops can't go back to the precinct. It takes too long for them to go to the precinct and come back and forth to actually take a break. At the same token, though, by you putting these pictures up, he doesn't understand the NYPD, how the NYPD works. Now he understands, as he saw a knee-jerk reaction. But that's the problem with the NYPD leadership. How do you keep up morale and camaraderie within the job? Of course, we could talk about the unions. There's problems with that. But with the leadership, instead of saying, hey, wait a minute. So the cops are in the MTA break rooms. Let's find out when, what times. Are they actually there for meal? Are they spending their entire tour there? What's going on? They have nowhere to go. These guys aren't going to go back to the precinct and go back and forth. It takes too much time for that break. Otherwise, it takes them too far away from transit. They need time off. There's no doubt about it. There's confirmed studies that employees that take breaks put out better output of work and their ability when they have rest periods. You need rest periods. Personally, I know what he's saying. Oh, they shouldn't be sleeping. I personally don't care. If you're a cop with experience and you're in a room, a private room, and you're closing your eyes, and we all know it, if you're a cop with experience, if there's a 1013, he said if there's a 1013, they're not going to respond. If you're a cop and you hear something, there's a 1013, you're going to wake up and respond to it. I don't think you go into that deep REM sleep where you're not going to hear it. Now, if you're taking your clothes off completely in your vest, that's a problem. If you're in your full uniform, you sit down, you close your eyes, and you're basically in meditation for some period of time, I have no problem with that. But he was trying to say is that these cops are so knocked out that they're not even going to hear a 1013. That part, I really find it hard to believe that. I don't see that happen.
Well, I mean, some of the things, if you watched, they were knocked out. I'm not going to lie. I think that's, I think if you're a cop and like, I know Marlon was talking about, I did midnights and I took a 20-minute power nap, but he was back at the precinct, safe location, right? Secured location. I think that's a little different than when we're talking about in transit. Me personally, I did midnights. Also, I couldn't sleep because if I took a 20-minute nap or a 30-minute nap, I was done. I couldn't wake back up. The rest of my tour was horrible. So I was like, I just couldn't do it. But I'll tell you, I would never be able to be knocked out in transit. And some of the things he was showing is these people were knocked out, and he sent me more stuff later on of newer stuff, and it's bad. Guys are knocked out. I mean, they're basically laughing at people, putting cameras in their face, and they're knocked out. So, but again, I still say, like, that's an issue. Like, what are your inspections teams doing that you're paying them all this money and they're getting 40 hours a month? What are the supervisors doing? From what I'm hearing is it's not systemic, and I'm hearing these guys are getting scratched 3 or 4 times a night. So I don't think they really are knocked out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's systemic. I think that you're going to have those people who don't understand where they are, or they're laxy-daisy. Unfortunately, cops get that way. I think probably every single one of us has gotten that point at one point in our career or another. But it shows, like, if you really are feeling that comfortable to be knocked out, maybe you're really that tired too, because sometimes, I've passed out like so tired that I just knocked out. You've been up. I mean, do that for a week. You just get off a detail and now you're doing a 16-hour tour in transit and you got one lined up for tomorrow and you literally can't keep your eyes open. I mean, we're human. So, I mean, that's the thing when we talk about the overworking, and even Mamdani brought up the fact that why people are leaving is the forced amount of hours they're being made to work. And it's only going to get worse by things like this.
It just goes again to how John Shell just completely lied to the public. When he said that there's 33,500, that is an outright lie. I don't have to see any paperwork. Anyone who's active with the police department or retired, that's a complete lie. I retired September 2022. And at the time, I think there was 33,000, around 33,500, according to the 360 internet, right? So if anybody knows, that was a new database, new software for the NYPD. We could track how many people are on the job, how many police officers, how many of every rank, how many every rank is in every precinct, what are the demographics, this whole thing called the 360 internet. And according to that was about 33,500. That was September 2022. Look at the mass exodus, the staffing crisis that we had. That is a complete lie. And it does go to say that maybe these cops are so tired that they have to get that point of rest. Now, listen, like Marlon said, I agree. I worked at I was an anti-crime sergeant about a year. We had Asians getting attacked in the Lower East Side, and we worked at 8 at night to 4 in the morning. And those are pretty much overnight hours. And I would need like a 10-minute cat nap just to make it through. It helps. But I was never to the point where I'm laid out, like I'm naked or, in my pajamas, REM sleep, just sitting there getting a little power nap so you could, push through the rest of the night. So, I don't know these MTA break rooms, what they look like. Are they secure rooms? Can you lock them? I don't know what the conditions of these rooms are, but it does raise a lot of questions. And it shows the leadership doesn't care. They just care about, they don't want to be bothered with it, right? They'd rather just, hey, let's lock these rooms out. Let's not be bothered with it. And so that, former Chief Madry and Kinsella could do whatever they want with the police department, but not actually address the issue. Let's find out what's going on with our guys. Are they so overextended? Are they so tired? Let's figure out a different plan because it's not working. These cops are overworked. They burn the candle at both ends, but they just don't care. They just don't care. They put a Band-Aid on it. That's it. And 6 months from now, I tell you, it's going to be forgotten about. The cops will be back in the MTA break rooms. And then 6 months after that, we'll hear from Trammell again, and then they'll pull another knee-jerk reaction. That's what they're doing because they're not correcting the problem.
Yeah. So, and Ron says knee-jerk reaction to the post, make them off limits. There should have been increased supervision implemented. That's it. And from Ron, again, those were old photos. So what I'm hearing is like their increased supervision is there. So it's like, I don't, if you're getting scratched 3-4 times a night, I think that's sufficient, if not, you got a real problem in your recruitment. Hood Maya says this guy Mamdani was a wasted episode. He might have been looking at the number of viewers and said this is not worth my time. I mean, possibly. Listen, I was expecting to have about 40,000 people on here. We had about 50,000 on here the other day while we were live. X is weird, man. Sometimes they don't want things to get out, or sometimes maybe it just doesn't fit in the algorithm. I don't know what it is. For some reason, it didn't go far on X today. Not sure what the rationale was, but I mean, there's about 650 people here live with us right now, and by the end of the day, there'll be thousands and thousands of people on this, and within the month, there'll be tens of thousands of people who have watched this episode. So I think that would be pretty short-sighted. I don't think that was the reasoning. I don't think that was the reasoning. When you tally it up, the finest unfiltered across all platforms. I mean, we're touching millions of views, just the episodes, never mind our social media posts. So there's a lot of eyes on the podcast. It's getting watched. So I don't think that is it. I think it's short-sighted. And again, like I always said, we're a small podcast, but we're a mighty podcast because it's the people that watch and the people that listen and the people that weigh in that matter, and the people that matter in New York City watch and listen to this podcast. So I don't think that was it at all.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I think he didn't want to get into the minutia about the public safety team. I don't think he wanted to get into minutia of questions. I don't think he realized how prepared we were in a sense of the conversation we're going to have as far as these questions. And I think really the question about Marlon made him uncomfortable because he knew that was complete opposition, polarizing to what our stance is. Obviously, since Marlon is the finest unfiltered family, and also, we think that all vaccinated workers or unvaccinated workers should come back to work. So I think that was the point. That was the start of the uncomfortable conversation, and he knew the questions were just going to be met with opposition. I don't think he was prepared for that.
Yeah, Marlon says he's accustomed to getting softball questions from the media. But who isn't? Like, which candidates aren't? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, does the media even really understand the policies? Are they looking at the big picture? Like that's kind of the stuff. Like, how is it effective? Like, you just take that talking point of freeze the rent, right? I knew that it didn't affect me, but I wanted to ask him it to just prove a point that, like, if you listen to the right media, if you listen to the right-leaning media, it's like he's going to take down small landlords, right? They're all going to be done. Not totally true. Some of it's true, not totally true. And if you listen to the left, they're like, he's fighting back against the big corporations. But he's not. And so, like, so I wanted him to answer what his policy was, and he did. And his policy was kind of, he was helping out rent stabilized people because he was trying to protect the elderly, which, the increases of a 12% year increase when you're on a fixed income could cause you to be homeless. Right. And so if you're trying to correct that, you know what else could cause you to be homeless? When you're terminated from your job for absolutely no reason legally, like Paul and Bethel was. So, like, it's a lot more nuanced. Like, all of these people's positions are a lot more nuanced than what you'll get out of mainstream media. Jack Stern, he produces some of the shows on here. He's actually with us today. He produced the Sal Greco show. He produces the Executive Perspective. He helps us out when we need someone in the background. He had said, and I agree with him. He said that the difference between the finest unfiltered and the media, he goes, the media gives you a little bit about a lot of things, right? They give you a little bit. They just touch the surface, freeze the rent. What does that mean? I don't know. Next topic, right? But he's like, what the finest unfiltered does is different, is they give you a lot about a little bit. And I was like, you know what? I agree with that, because we go into the minutia of everything. We go into the minutia of the legislation. We try to look around it on all sides. And I think, it's hard for candidates to actually have those long form conversation. That's particularly why I'm not a big fan of politicians, is because I say it constantly, and why I'm not a big fan of the appointed management, the NYPD, and why I'm not a big fan of a lot of people in this country, because the things they say at their dinner table are completely different than the things that they say when they're out in the media. Unlike myself and Eric, the shit that we say in the morning, joking around, and the shit that we say is the same stuff we're talking about at a dinner table. There is not a different conversation. You know, Eric says it consistently. He's like, if anybody like tape records us or phone taps us, they're gonna be like, oh my God, these guys don't have an ulterior motive. Like, you know, like there's nothing else there, you know, like they, you know, so it's funny, you know, it's funny.
Yeah, I talk about all the time. It's true. You know, if there was a tape recorder, we don't have to worry. The same conversation that we have behind closed doors, the same conversation we put on the podcast, which is why we started going live. Like, why don't we listen? We were having conversation for 2-3 hours talking about what's the next podcast, what we're going to talk about. Like, this could have been a podcast itself because it's the same information. Now, people like John Shell, what they say behind closed doors is much different than what they say in public. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live like that. You know what? If I'm caught,
well, now his real conversation is like starting to come out more. Now that Adams is MAGA aligned, now that he's blue MAGA, you know,
he's blue MAGA, dude. He's blue MAGA. But I think that you know, I think Hood Mayor makes, you know, a good point about the views, but I don't think he was looking at that at all. I mean, you see our views. Sometimes they're astronomical. We have a pretty steady pace. I think he knew what he was in for. I just think the conversation started to get a lot more in depth. He talks about depth than what he expected. And again, a lot of times these politicians are used to sound bites. To go deep into your platform, it really takes some effort. And I just think he did a good job of sideswiping us, answering us questions, and it was time to go.
Yeah. Stay Trained Up says, you remember Jimmy McMillian from the Rent is Too Damn High party? His campaign made sense for Zohran because the rent is too damn high. I mean, listen, the rents are in New York City are insane, you know? So, I mean, anyone running on that platform, I want to make New York City more affordable. I mean, you're going to get a lot of support, and that's why he has the amount of support, you know? Snake Plissken says nobody's beating Cuomo. I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I don't think you guys are paying attention, bro. I'm telling you, I see him as the most formidable candidate in this election. So, you know, and you know, and what you guys might not like him, but he's very likable. You run into this guy on the street. I personally think his demeanor and his gait, if he's just could give you the quick boom, 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 and in and out. I mean, I think he wins you over in a second. You know, you do a quick in and out with Eric Adams, you kind of like him. You know, Eric Adams, you don't like him. You do a quick in and out with Andrew Cuomo, you kind of like him. You know Andrew Cuomo, you don't like him. You know the difference? Nobody knows Zohran. So he's just getting the quick in and outs, and they like him. And the things he's saying make sense.
That's why I think of all these guys. They're like gold-plated bracelets, you know, like, you know, it looks shiny, it looks nice, and then you start scraping on it, and then underneath it's you know, there's something different there. It's garbage. And that's the reality. Listen, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I think he came off as very congenial. Do I agree with all his policies? Absolutely not. But I think that this is a real opportunity to, on a platform like this, to really dive into your policies and get into the minutia. That's something that these politicians should want. You should want to get into the minutia because you don't have that opportunity in most engagements. You're just scratching the surface. So here's an opportunity to actually get into it and really get into minutia, why this would work and how you intend to implement the NYPD. And, you know, like Marlon said, I agree. I don't think he was prepared for us talking about corporations fleeing from New York City. Because I tell you right now, you start raising taxes on these big corporations, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to leave. They're not going to stay. They're going to be out. They're leaving already. So now you raise taxes on them, they're out the door.
I mean, the other thing that always gets short-sighted is like we're always, and again, like I said, I'm anti-everybody. Like I'm making a t-shirt, I'm anti-everybody. But like, you know who I'm not, and it's not true because you know who I'm not anti-everybody? Like the working middle class, like that who is fleeing New York City in droves. And like, how are you retaining and recruiting them to come back? How are you retaining them from leaving? And then how are you enticing people to come back? You know, and like you're not doing either of those things. So basically you're losing your entire tax base. And that's the whole thing, you know? So I haven't heard anyone other than a Walden and a Sliwa talk about like a plan that the average middle class actually is like, all right, yeah, let's go. Some of the points that Zohran raises, like I don't want elderly people getting their rent raised, young people who can't afford the rent, people that live there. I mean, that's a legit point, and the people are going to hook on that. I want to make New York City more affordable. That's a great campaign when everything is skyrocketing, right? When you go to get eggs and it's $20 a carton, or you go to fill up your tank and you're spending $150, you walking into Costco, you get 5 items and it's like $250, and you're like, I used to fill up my shopping cart for that last year or 2 years ago or whatever, and like, so and the salaries aren't increasing, and so he's talking about raising the minimum wage. If you're a minimum wage worker, that appeals to you right there, right? So I'm gonna just say it again. I've said it already. Do not sleep on Zohran. Do not sleep on him. I said it in the beginning of this podcast. I've been saying it for a few months. He is a formidable candidate. He is destroying them. When you look at his campaign, he has the most well-run campaign out of everybody in the mayoral field. And I'll say it again and again and again.
He's definitely a viable candidate. There's no doubt about it. He's a front runner. He's a front runner for the working class. He's a front runner for the middle class. And I think that chart, it just completely depicts that, showing that most of his donations are $1 to $175 in comparison to Eric Adams, who really is attractable to the elites. Right, the elites in New York City, they want Eric Adams because of real estate, potential casino deals, which is really the emphasis on what's going on with Rikers. Right? It's about getting real estate, about getting casinos. The elites want Eric Adams. The working people and the middle class, they want somebody like Zohran. But we have to find some middle ground also. I understand what he's saying. We do have to protect the elderly. Some of these elderly people, unfortunately, their lifespans have lasted much longer, which is, I would like to, but we didn't get an opportunity to talk to them about pensions, right? Because pensions is something we need to talk about. It's scary what's happening right now. Are pensions secure? Not necessarily. And, us being on the receiving end of pensions is something that we have to pay close attention to also. What does he think about pensions? Because right now it's scary what could happen with these pensions, especially when it's in the hands of people that have no idea on how to handle money, just like Brad Landis. I mean, so, to me, that's a big concern.
A lot of problems, not a lot of solutions, I'm hearing. So so we'll see who else, maybe we'll reach out to Scott Stringer. He was supposed to come on a while back. I never really followed up on that. I'll follow up with him. We'll see if he's come on. Curtis Sliwa. We got a ton of candidates for other seats: city council, public advocate, Brooklyn borough president. So we're gonna start to ramp it up a little bit. We're gonna start. I think we're gonna start to come back on the Thursday. Maybe the following week we'll do it. And we'll start have more candidates on, candidates for controller, just till the election cycle is done, just so we could get through, and again, Republican, Democratic, Socialist, Democrat, Liberal, doesn't matter. We're going to have them on here. We'll see who they are, feel them out, see how willing they are to answer questions and talk and go through their policies. And we're going to do it in the same manner we always do it, so like I said, if you guys don't like it, start your own podcast. you do it your way. Thanks for Snake Plissken. He says, please hit the like button on the way out. If you guys could do us a favor when you do watch the show, wherever you're watching or liking, if you could hit the like button, subscribe, or if you could reshare if you're watching on X, greatly appreciate it. Like I said, for whatever reason, the X algorithm is not loving us lately. Some days it does, some days it doesn't. Some days we get 20,000 people on here. Some days we get 600. Some days we get a few thousand. It depends what it is. But I know myself and Eric, we traditionally don't care if there's 6 people or there's 60,000 people, because we were doing this when there was nobody watching it. So, we'll continue to do it. So, appreciate everybody for being on here, joining. And honestly, just a shout out the professionalism, even the juju and the people that are coming in here to, make claims that I was driving around in my department car making beer runs. Anyone that knows me knows I'm never a big drinker. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Would never happen. Could never happen. Not anything I would ever do, my friend. So, keep sitting up in 1PP, watching the show, coming on fake names, telling lies. That's it.
About 2 hours and 15 minutes into it. We had a good conversation, short conversation. We did get played also, but you know what? I'm sure we have more opportunity for Zohran to speak to his people and come back here. Of course, listen, everybody, I hope you got a chance to see Sa Greco's show yesterday. If not, it's recorded. Take a look at Sa Greco. Of course, he'll be on tomorrow, also 1305 live. And today we got for you, as always, the Executive Perspective. They'll be on 5:05 p.m. or, as I like to say, 17:05. They got a good show coming for you. Thank you so much. Like, share, and subscribe, as John said. It's really important. Please, it helps out. Keep liking, sharing, subscribing. Share it out. That really helps our friends and listeners. We really appreciate it. And haters, we appreciate you also. It helps us grow. Let's keep growing together. We did hit a milestone this week. We hit 10,000 subscribers. So we're definitely growing. We appreciate it. It's a big feat. Hopefully we'll see you soon at 100,000 subscribers. Let's keep going. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. The Executive Perspective tonight got Big Ron Layson and Rob Lukash put on another great show. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.